Santos Caban, thanks for being here with me.
Pleasure.
This man is a two-time Division I All-American wrestler when he was in college. He's a second-degree black belt from Stan Beck, who I first started Jiu-Jitsu with, and that's where you got your black belt.
Stan's the man.
Yeah, he is. And he's been here before. I'm sure you've seen. You're a father of four. You're married?
Father of three, one bonus kid. I actually kind of took him in his 8th grade year in high school, and he was from the inner city. Mm-hmm. So I kind of took him in and got him situated in a stable environment, and sent him off to college last year. So good. That's my bonus kid.
Is he the wrestler?
Yeah, Kendrick. Yeah, he goes to my oldest son, Skylar, just graduated this past weekend. He has his international business degree. He's staying one more year to wrestle. He has one more year of eligibility, and he's getting his master's in business leadership.
Wow, where's he going to school?
Belmont Abbey in North Carolina, Charlotte. And then Kendrick goes to Campbell University. It's a D1 program in Raleigh.
And wrestling also.
Yeah, wrestling also.
Wow. And are the other two girls?
No, I have my 14-year-old son, Hunter. You've met him
before.
Of course. Big boy.
Yeah, big boy.
My oldest daughter is 23. She's going to be 24 in June. She's in nursing school.
Did she ever wrestle?
She did a little bit. She's a purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu. So, yeah, she's been training since she was about 13, 14. And, I had grown men that didn't like training with her.
Yeah, I'm sure. Purple and up, those girls are vicious.
Yeah.
So tell me about where you started out.
As far as...
where were you born?
I was born in New York. We moved down here, the Great Puerto Rican Migration in like 1979. My dad and my mom moved down here for a better situation. And just overall, I was lucky enough to grow up down here. I didn't grow up in the best neighborhood. I was kind of I was in North Miami. So I was the Puerto Rican kid in the black neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So I grew up having to earn my spot, earn my place.
Yeah. Is that what got you into wrestling?
Yeah. My father was always into boxing. I grew up watching all the greats, and he wanted me to box, and he put me up with one of my cousins who used to fight in the police athletic league, and I got punched in the face. I didn't like it. So I shot a double leg takedown, never knowing how to wrestle before I was like 5 or 6. Wow. And
so that's like an instinct.
That was my instinct
to keep from getting hit.
Yeah. So I took him down, and they were like, "Well, why'd you do that?" I don't like getting punched in the face. Wow. So that's how that kind of started my journey in wrestling. I've been on the mat since I was about 5 years old.
You were kind of like the Hoist Gracie before Hoist Gracie, when nobody knew about that stuff. That's
something
cool.
like that.
So were your parents born in New York or Puerto Rico?
My father's Puerto Rican, my mother's Dominican, but my grandfather, her father was he's Puerto Rican. He was his family was a missionary. Oh. So they went to the Dominican Republic, and that's where my mom was born. And then my mom came to the United States when she was about 13. They settled in New York. Both sides of my family are really big. My dad has 10 brothers and sisters. My mom has 11.
Dang.
So,
how many cousins do you have?
Too many to count.
And uncles and aunts. That's a lot of people to remember their name.
Yeah.
Are they up there? They're in Puerto Rico?
They're kind of all spread out. A lot of them, were in New York. Now a lot of them settled in Georgia. So my parents moved in about 2008. They moved to Atlanta. And that's kind of where my mom's family hub is now. Like all her brother, about 6 or 7 of them are now. They've all settled in Atlanta, Georgia, and that's kind of where they all migrate, and that's kind of like the central hub for the family.
Yeah, and so you got into wrestling, and you were a Division I All-American, but did you start wrestling from that moment where you had that boxing match and you took the legs?
Yeah, it was one of those things where it's like our instinctual. So it's something that always came kind of naturally to me. So I started wrestling at a very early age. I was lucky enough to find my high school coach pretty early. And
you were able to train with him, even though you were a little kid at the time?
Yeah.
Wow. What high school?
North Miami.
Okay.
Joe Jacoby. He was, if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have graduated high school. You always have that one person who kind of pushes you and drives you. And he figured out how to tune me up and how to kind of push me. So I owe a lot to him. He died a few years ago. But yeah, if it wasn't that for him pushing me and him helping me and kind of being on my ass all the time, I wouldn't be here.
In the moment when he was pushing you, what was that like?
Well, it's kind of weird because my dad was a Navy guy, right? So I always kind of knew what was expected of me. I was the oldest, but my father kind of pushed, and he kind of knew how. And Coach Jacoby always knew how to do the same thing, right? So he was like he was harsh, but he was also kind of all right. He knew when to be hard, when to be soft, and kind of guide me to where I needed to be. And he was very good at getting into my head and getting into my psyche.
So you took it well.
Yeah.
You didn't rebel from it?
No, it was funny because with my dad I did, because it's your dad.
Yeah.
And then with your coach, it's like, all right, cool. Coach knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So, and I kind of went through the same thing with my oldest son too. But yeah, for the most part, me having that coach, athlete relationship helped me out a lot, and he really knew how to. When he had to get in my ass, he got in my ass.
Yeah.
But
and how have your kids taken it as you coach them through jiu-jitsu and wrestling?
My daughter, I had to kind of defer to someone else because I believe that there needs to be that relationship. Coach needs to be coach. Dad needs to be dad. So Solon.
Yeah.
Right. So Solon is, I've had Solon with me since he was a white belt, blue belt. He came over with me to Lake Worth, from Weston. And, he also he's developed into being a really, really good coach. And, whenever Haley would compete, I would be yelling at her. Solon would say the same exact thing. And then she listened to him.
Yeah. Funny story. There's a biblical saying that a prophet is never accepted in his own land, right? Because you're too close. That's Santos from down the street.
Yeah.
What does he know? But
Exactly.
you go somewhere else and you're that guy. My son, Ryan, when he was little, was selling chocolates, and we were at a gas station, and I pull up, and when I would fuel up, he'd go hit up all the people getting gas and come back with like $40, $20. And one day I said to him, hey, Ryan, you know what you should do is you should say this, this, and this to people, and I think you'll sell more. And, he heard it. Okay. And then we go to this gas station. He gets out and he goes to sell to this guy, and he doesn't go to any other cars. He runs right back to me. And I said, what happened? And he says, that guy, he's so smart. You know what he told me? And he told me everything. I go, I just told you that earlier today. And he stopped. He goes, oh yeah, you did. Whatever.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we don't have that impact, that sticky advice power. All right. So you wrestled as a kid. Any other sports? Did you play?
I played football.
Yeah.
I played football in high school. I played Optimist football, which is, from 12 to the tween years. Yeah. And I played a lot of the other sports just recreationally, right? But my main two sports that I played in high school were I wrestled and I played football. I had an opportunity to get scholarships for both, but I went with wrestling because wrestling's always kind of been my first love.
Yeah.
And
where did you go to college?
Cleveland State up in Ohio.
Why all the way up there? I know wrestling is big up there.
At the time, there were really no wrestling programs down here in Florida.
Wow.
So, I originally went to junior college first because like I said, if it wasn't for my high school coach, I probably wouldn't have gone away to college. But my high school grades, I was a little bit of a slacker. I could have done better, hindsight. But when you're in high school, it's like, God, I don't want to be here. All that other stuff. So,
but you graduated high school, and you graduated college.
Yeah.
What did you major in?
Political science.
Oh, okay.
I was a poli-sci major.
Yeah. So you own an academy. Mm-hmm. You've been at it for years and doing well. But that wasn't a career path. When you graduated college, you couldn't just go say, I'm going to go start a jiu-jitsu academy. You didn't even.
No, that wasn't even a thought process at all.
So how did we get here? What did you do first?
All right. So originally I was a poli-sci major. I was a high school teacher for a few years. I taught history.
Taught history?
I taught history.
Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. I loved being in the classroom. I just didn't love the pay and the politics, all that bullshit. Yeah. I could do without.
How long did you do that?
I did that for about 4 years.
How old were you? Right out of college?
Right out of college.
That must have been kind of cool, right? Because you're young at that point. You can kind of relate to the kids.
Yeah. I was doing that, and I was coaching with my high school wrestling coach. I was his assistant coach at Miami Beach Senior High.
Yeah, that's cool. Did the kids respect you?
Yeah.
Is it because you're big?
Something like that.
I would have behaved for sure.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so you taught for a little bit, and then what?
Then I wanted to further my education, and I wanted to get my master's. So I went back up to school up in Ohio. I did that for a little bit, and then I was married at the time. At that, I got married pretty early. I think I was 23 years old when I got married, so really young.
Yeah.
Bamboozled my wife into moving back up to going up to Cleveland.
Back to cold winters.
It was kind of funny.
Oh.
She had never been Florida girl, born and
Wow.
raised, never been up, seeing snow up there, and it was a shock for her at first. Did that, was going to school. Then my daughter came along, and had to be a big boy and be responsible and get a normal job. So I dropped out. I never got my master's. So what I was doing is I got into hospitality. I started off at the front desk. 3 months later, I was promoted to supervisor, and then I met another gentleman who helped me out with something that was kind of new in hospitality, which was called revenue management. So basically, learned everything I could. Started getting my feet wet and understanding it. It was for me, it was really interesting because it was something new and exciting. And then kind of took off, and I started working with different hotels and revenue management, and just kind of that avenue.
How long were you in that world?
Wow, 15 years.
Wow. Did you enjoy it?
At first I did. The higher up you get, the more bullshit you got to deal with.
The less
right?
fun it becomes.
And the less fun it becomes, because there's people that are way further removed than what you are, right? So they have that 30,000 foot view. You're in the trenches. So you're working with the general managers, the sales managers, at the property level, understanding what the scope of business is, right? For instance, I had a hotel in New Hope, New Jersey, right, where Johnson & Johnson was their biggest client, and you're talking about 15, 20,000 room nights a year.
Wow.
Johnson & Johnson laid off half their force.
Oh. There goes the revenue.
But you still have to make that number, right? So what's happening is, they have, the REIT, they have their investors that they have to pay. And when you're doing the budget, well, you need to make this number. I don't know how you're going to replace it, but if you want me to back into that number, I will, but don't yell at me or the hotel when, the revenue doesn't come in the same time. The revenue growth doesn't come in year over year.
So this is high pressure, high stress?
High pressure, high stress. Budget season sucked, right? So budget season really started in October and didn't end until December, maybe the middle of January, just depending on.
And what's that mean? What's budget season? What's that?
Making your segmented budget goals, right? So every hotel has a budget, whether it's, if you have 5 outlets, right? You have 5, like I had one hotel in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, who had 5 outlets, right? They have 5 restaurants, convention space that you have to fill. Now, the sales managers are responsible for getting that business. I'm responsible for making sure that it fits at certain times, right? So it's kind of like you're putting a puzzle together.
Yeah.
And
I rent hotel rooms and ballrooms for events and retreats and stuff. They don't know about me unless I call them. Were you guys outbound? Were you calling, or are you just servicing big clients that are going to bring revenue?
Both. So you have sales managers that are responsible for certain corporate clients, right? So J&J would be one. GlaxoSmithKline, like some of those big pharma companies and things like that. So, they're responsible for nurturing and bringing and maintaining that business, right?
Yeah.
But then also you have other sales managers that are responsible for just normal retail stuff.
Yeah.
You're throwing a party for 500 people,
right?
Renting out the space room. Oh, do you need rooms attached to that? Yes. Okay. So all of that has a nominal piece of the puzzle that their goals are kind of reflected or based off of. Maybe
I got to learn from you how to get a discount, because I pay top retail. I get no discount. I don't even know how to negotiate that sort of thing. I guess I don't give them enough volume.
Yeah, I'm kind of the reason. So for instance, if you had Ultra, that was in March, right? I would be the reason why you're paying $500.
Okay, that drives. Yeah, that drives it up.
Demand drives, exactly.
Well, what I found interesting is my wife and I, whenever we had an event in Miami on a weekend, we would typically have somebody stay with our kids, maybe my in-laws or whoever. And as we were driving down for that event, call it on a Friday night, we would say, oh, let's get a hotel on the way and get it. And it was never a problem until COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And one night we were doing the exact same thing, and we just couldn't find, there was like 5 rooms in Miami available, and the price was double. And we just kept not realizing, oh, COVID caused this. Mm-hmm. Everybody closed. We stayed open. Demand here. People who had those revenue jobs here must have been crushing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So you did this. You weren't in what you loved. You weren't in wrestling. You weren't grappling. There was no jiu-jitsu. What was that first introduction for you to get you back into the sport?
Well, I was always involved with wrestling because my oldest son was wrestling. He wrestled at the high school level when he was in 6th grade because he went to a charter school. So, and there's another one where he was on the mat since he was like 5 years old, right? So in high school or with charter schools that have a high school program, if you're in the middle school, you're allowed to wrestle at the high school level.
What a great preparation for a kid to have that.
I mean, he got his ass kicked a little bit, like 6th and 7th grade, but once 8th grade came in,
he was strong.
It clicked, and plus he was a lighter weight, right? So Skylar was so I was always involved with him in wrestling, so that kind of gave me my fix. He graduated. He was a 2-time state champion. Went away to college, and then I kind of got burned out with the wrestling, because think about it, from 6th grade to 12th grade, every national tournament, we were wrestling year round. Yeah. You're traveling. I mean, we would drive to Virginia Beach, Virginia Duels, NHSCAs, and Virginia Duels. We'd leave at 10 o'clock at night to drive 13 hours through the night, so we didn't have to deal with traffic. And I had a 15-passenger van of wrestlers cutting weight, and they're all asleep, dehydrated and shit. So it was kind of one of those things where, like, you have to fight yourself to stay awake. Yeah. So that kind of gave me my fix for a while. And then once he graduated, I took a break. But in 2018, Stan had approached me to opening the academy in Lake Worth.
But wait, at that point, first let's go back. When did you start jiu-jitsu?
I started jiu-jitsu when I was living in New Jersey. I was, like we were talking earlier, I kind of started off with kind of like an underground, bunch of guys. I had Sean, I had Joel, I had Dave, which Joel and Sean, they were at McGuire and Fort Dix Air Force Base. So I kind of met them. I was hanging out and I was training with one of my friends who owned his own wrestling academy, Advantage Wrestling Academy out in Pennsauken. So I was helping him coach, and that's how I met those guys. And I've always been interested in jiu-jitsu, but it was like, all right, I'm a wrestler. Started hanging out and working out with those guys and training with those guys, and then I met Brian McPherson, who was one of Ricardo Almeida's black belts. Started training with them.
Was it called jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Okay,
I was presenting jiu-jitsu at the time. I mean, we're really talking 2004, 2005, somewhere around there. So, I mean, jiu-jitsu was there, just wasn't as mainstream or as popular as it is now. But I started training with Brian McPherson, who was he was a state trooper for New Jersey. And one of my wrestlers at the time, Jonathan Webb, he owns Webb MMA out in New Jersey, and he's fought MMA. But I got into. He said, "Coach, you got to come try jiu-jitsu." So I went from training with Sean and those guys to training with Brian and stuff like that. And then it was like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. Got my ass kicked. Brian McPherson was 5'6", 5'7", $160 soaking wet.
Dang. And how big are you?
I'm 6'2", 265. He beat the dog snot out of me.
Even though a D1 All-American wrestler.
Yeah, so that was like, wow, so then I was like, all right, cool. So there's something to this. And, I got the itch and I started training. And then when the market collapsed in 2008, Lehman Brothers, all that stuff, I lost my job. And I was working for a management company out, based out in Philly. And I was like, all right, I guess we're coming back home. We're back home to Florida. And so I asked Ricardo and I asked Brian, I'm like, where should I train? And where are you going to be? I'm like, well, I was living in Davie at the time. And they're like, oh, you got to go train with Stan. So that's how I met Stan. And I met Stan and Juan there, walked in. At that time, I had a tap-out shirt on. It's funny because I had a tap-out shirt on, and they're looking at me, and I'm like, "Oh, where'd you train?" I said, "No, I'm coming from Bryan's school up north and stuff like that." And so Stan's like, "Oh, you wrestled?" I'm like, "Yeah." So Stan being the businessman he is, he's like, "All right, let's negotiate." So I taught his wrestling program, and and I trained jiu-jitsu, so we kind of bartered a little bit. And then he goes, "Nice shirt." And at the time, me not knowing Stan's sense of humor, and then later on, they're talking shit about the tap out. I'm like, this motherfucker, he was making fun of me the first day.
Yeah, who does he think he is? And so
Yeah.
let's go back a little bit to what you talked about. You lost your job. You got kids. You got a wife. Was that a stressful moment for you?
Very, very. I mean, me always, I've never not had a job. I've been working since I was 14 years old, so.
How long were you unemployed?
Not long, because as soon as I started putting out my resume, I had, not to sound arrogant, but I had a pretty impressive resume.
Yeah.
So I got hired pretty quickly. When I first moved down here, we lived in Wellington. I lived there for a year. I worked for a management company on Palm Beach Island. I hated it. I got hired as a vice president of revenue management for that company. Just the people, the culture, the mindset. I hated it. So I stuck it out for a year. And then I moved further south, because my wife's mom at the time was really, really sick. She had Parkinson's. So I was like, all right, well, let's move closer because, family and all that stuff. So we moved from Wellington down to Davie. And then I started working at a hotel by the airport. It was the Wyndham at first, and then we converted it into a Sheraton down by Miami Airport.
Is that the one where they do a lot of jiu-jitsu tournaments? By the airport?
The Hilton. The Hilton is the one, but this is right across the street, across the highway.
Yeah.
So I worked there for a little bit, and then I started working for IHG, Intercontinental Hotel Group, and I worked for them for 7 years. That gave me the opportunity to be at home more, because it was a remote position. So it was.
So when did you make the transition from all those years of doing this into being a full-time jiu-jitsu guy?
Stan approached me. He said, "Hey, I'm looking at a place," and this is after years of Stan having Weston for forever. I mean, I started off with Stan when it had all blue mats, and we're right next to the bicycle shop.
Wait, he had blue mats because of the Manhattan one was all blue?
I don't know, maybe, maybe. But yeah, it was a smaller spot. It was right next to the cleaners and a bicycle shop. And then we moved to a new space where it was bigger because, Stan opened up also kind of a CrossFit. Yeah. CrossFit place. And then the Jiu-Jitsu, which used to be, the space itself used to be a bar.
Where those warehouses are?
Where the pet supply is, where
where
that
he
Circle
was in
K,
that. Oh, that was a bar?
Yeah, it was a bar back in the day.
I didn't join jiu-jitsu until years later, but one day I was walking by where that location in Weston, and I saw a friend of mine walking in, and I remember he had a purple belt, and I thought, oh, he must do some sort of karate or something. And I saw him walking in there, so that's the only reason I remember that's where it was, and it was a bar before.
Yeah, it used to be a bar, and then we moved there. It was right next to the pet supply store, and then we moved, and then Stan. Something happened with the ownership not wanting to, Stan didn't want to do the CrossFit anymore. Something happened with the CrossFit side, and they still wanted him to charge. They still wanted to charge him for both spaces. And Stan's like, well, I'm only using one. So, but they wouldn't budge on that. So then he found the spot where we are now, one wrap a shotgun.
Yeah,
and
So at that point, were you coaching?
I've been coaching with Stan since like day one.
And was this but you were still working in the hotel industry?
Yeah.
So when did you make that? I want to hear about that change. That's a big change.
So when he approached me, he goes, "Hey, I found a spot but it's far. It's in Lake Worth, right?
Oh.
I'm living in Davie at the time, and I think I just moved to the house that we're in now in Pembroke Pines." And
how far is that drive, Pembroke Pines to Lake Worth?
Every day is about a 50-minute drive, depending on traffic. If traffic kicks in, it's a little over an hour, right?
It's a lot.
But as soon as, when you know, right? As soon as I walked in through those doors, it was like, oh shit, this space, it's huge. It's 5,000 square feet. The lobby space was ample enough. And then the mat room itself is huge, right? So it's like, it took me like 30 seconds. I'm like, I'm in. Mm-hmm. Right.
And you went in as partners?
We went in as partners. Stan fronted everything. I did a lot of the sweat equity. But at the time I was still working remote. Right. So, I mean, I was still, so working remote has its advantages, So
it's a great way to start a side business.
Exactly. So, so started working and, building out the academy. Stan handled the back of the house. I handled the front of the house. So, I coached most of the time. Stan was there a couple days a week, because Stan still loves to coach and teach. But, Weston was still his baby, So, he saw that, hey, Santos is serious. He's got, I think he's got it. At least I don't mean to speak for him, but we're still boys now. But he kind of took a step back. He continued to handle the back of the house, the marketing and stuff like that. And I continued the front of the house where, I'm closing people, I'm teaching, coaching, making sure everything's handled, all that good stuff.
Your background, negotiating and working with revenue, and I'm sure helped you tremendously.
So the sales aspect of it, learning, Stan was such a great friend at first and then a mentor. He's a great guy. I learned a shit ton from him. Just watching him, and I got to observe a lot, working with him over the years at Weston. But now it's like, all right, one-on-one, right? Now we're in this together, dude. So let's go ahead. So I learned everything from Stan, and it was just one of those things where I gravitated towards it naturally. I love the teaching aspect. I love coaching, and then learning the back end of the business, right? I learned about the marketing. I learned about the sales. I learned about everything. So, yeah, and I was.
So how long has it been? How long have you done this full time?
Full time, we're going on 4 years. Okay. Right. I worked for IHG all throughout COVID. At that time, all hotels they took a big dive. Yep. So they, I want to say, right towards the end of COVID, they were like, "Hey, who wants out? We'll pay you guys your severance package." And I was like, well, the academy is doing really well. I don't have to worry about juggling both. So I'm like, I'll take my buyout. Yeah. And, that was a big leap of faith, because, you're still at that time, a good 6-figure salary. Mm-hmm. On top of that, you're making bonus from the academy.
Yeah. Now it's going to go down to 1.
Now it goes down to 1.
But what happened when it must have given you this freedom? Yeah. That first day you woke up and you had one thing to do and it was yours.
Yeah.
How'd that feel?
It felt awesome. I told Stan, I'm like, dude, is this what you feel like all the time? He's like, yeah. I'm like, and don't get me wrong. I mean, it's stressful as all hell because, it's war of attrition. It's, because, you're
losing people
with the business. Yeah. You gain 5, you lose 1. Yeah. Next month you gain 10, you lose 5.
It's a stressful,
so your net
nonstop
gain isn't as big as you think it is, but, it's still fun. I still wake up every morning. I'm like, damn, I can do this, and this, and not have to worry about answering to anybody. I got to, and it's one of those things where the freedom feels great, but it's still very stressful because you still have to manage the numbers. You still have to make sure that your clients are happy.
Well, the trade-off is, although you were probably busy around the clock for the company that you worked for because you're at a high level, but the trade-off, I think the differences are that when you own the business, you have flexibility. At 12 o'clock today, go do whatever you want. But at 11 o'clock at night, you're still going to be worrying about the baby. Yeah. You're still going to be worrying about the business.
I'm still on my phone, looking at the app, looking at revenue, looking at, the bills, your overhead, everything. I still need to make payroll,
Yeah, it's a different kind of stress, but it's more rewarding.
Yeah.
I wonder all the time when people work for someone, and, somebody's got to work for somebody. It's not everybody should be an entrepreneur. We're not all cut out that way. But when they work for someone, I always feel like they're kind of like slaves. They have to be there from 9 to 5 or whatever the hours are. I can't relate. I haven't had a job since I was in my 20s. I've been doing my own thing. But again, it's not for everybody. But that's cool that you felt something different. And, okay, so then when did you get your black belt?
Wow. I'm going on, Stan owes me my belt.
He
owes me a stripe. He owes me my 3rd. But yeah, I've had it for 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've had your black belt twice as long as I've been in jiu-jitsu. I started jiu-jitsu 4.5 years ago. Man, I sure wish I could. You can't go backwards in time. You can only do more now. But I wish I would have done this earlier.
Everybody says that, but I find that it's within your own time, right? I mean, wanted to do it 20 years ago. What were you doing 20 years ago? You were still building your business.
I was working 14 hours a day.
Exactly. So everything happens with, when it's supposed to, right? Yeah. And now you can appreciate it, right? Now you're like, damn, I know the work it's taken for me to get my blue belt.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just your blue belt, right?
Yeah.
You know, and then you don't even know if you want to stick with this shit when you're a white belt. It's like, damn, my first few months I'm getting my ass kicked. You know, I see so and so getting better than me. You know, and that's the thing, right? But if you have that mindset, right, you've had that mindset to stick business out for your entire, you know, half your life, more than half your life, right?
Yep.
Same mindset with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, you know, there were, because fear, doubt, all of that's normal. We all have that. You can't say, I fear nothing. I don't have doubts. Oh, we're all human. I remember sometimes sitting in the class, listening to Stan talk, and he's giving the lesson, and then we were going to go do it. And I'm watching him. I go, what am I doing here? I started at 44 years old. Yeah. I'm almost 50 now. And I'm just watching, and I'm looking around, and I go, these guys are all monsters. They're all 20.
Yeah.
What the heck am I doing here? I'm going to get hurt. But then I'm not going to get up in the middle of it. So just go. And the more you do it, the more, I don't know. To me, it brings me back. I like focusing or looking back. And I think a cool number is the age of 12. Like, what did you really enjoy doing at the age of 12? I think we should do more of that. And for me, it was wrestling with my cousins, my neighbors, my friends.
That backyard.
Oh, yeah. And inside the house and just, oh, man. I remember wrestling my friend Omar. He's a chief of police now in California, which is crazy because we grew up in the ghetto and he did so well. We would wrestle on the tile floor, which is we'd be all sweating and slippering and having the time of our lives.
And rug burns.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Stupid boy stuff. That's why we all die earlier. And that feeling when I joined jiu-jitsu, that's what kept me going. Then I go, man, that adrenaline rush. You know, Brett Thompson, brown belt in our academy, told me something interesting. We were talking about, while we were drilling, we were talking about the book, The 5 Love Languages. I'm a huge fan of it. Dr. Gary Chapman, he's been on the podcast, and I recommend that book to everybody in the relationship. I told him, you know, we're just talking about what's your love language, what's your wife. This is while we're drilling. And he says, yeah, mine's physical touch. And I said, mine too. And then he said something interesting. He said, I think that's why I like jiu-jitsu so much. And I go, really? I mean, because we're guys touching each other. Don't you want your wife to touch you? No, clearly. But that feeling, the touch, it doesn't change, and you want to feel connected. You want to win, and you want to hurt the other person maybe, but
it depends on the day.
Yeah. But it's interesting that you like physical touch, and you enjoy wrestling and grappling and jiu-jitsu. Have you done your 5 love languages? You ever taken that quiz?
Mine is a combination. Mine is touch, and the other one is gift giving.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You like gifts?
Yeah.
I'll pick something up here to give you later.
No, I like giving. I like the act of giving.
Well, how about getting?
That not so much.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that not so much. I like, you know, when, you know, my kids or my wife, you know, just tell me something. I'll keep a little mental note.
Yeah.
And hey, you know,
I got you this little gift.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's nice.
But nice. Me getting gifts, I'm very bad at that. It's like, you know, I don't need. I have everything I need.
That's funny. I think the exact same thing. Whenever I've gotten asked, I say it would be a gift to me if you gave me nothing. Yeah. Because I don't receive it well. I don't need anything, right? You need a T-shirt. You go on Amazon, you go wherever, and you buy yourself a T-shirt. Yeah. That's interesting. So, how many people could you fit in your academy? Like, what's the goal to get to what number of students? Have you thought that?
Wow. Right now, I've got close to 200 overall, kids and adults. I mean, if you can get 250, 300, you know, Tuesday nights, Monday, Tuesday, because I teach, I kind of stagger how the days and the times that I teach simply because so I can touch everybody. I'm one person. Yeah. So I'll teach Monday mornings. I'll teach the morning class, and then, you know, that class is, you know, 15, 20 guys, you know, kind of steady. My Tuesday night class, I get anywhere between 35 and 50 people on the mats. You know, I've had seminars there where, you know, I've had over, you know, 150 people there. Wow. It's packed, but I mean, my mat space is pretty ample.
What do you think is a number that if you hit this number that, man, I can't even accept any new?
I think anything over 250 will probably
that's a number.
Be like, you know, and then I have to be like, all right, well, if that stays consistent, then I'll just start talking to the management to see if I can expand, you know, a little bit more. But yeah, 250 is that number right now.
Yeah. I think. Do you spread? How many days are you open?
We're open 6 days.
Okay. Closed on Sundays?
Closed on Sundays, but I let the guys, you know, if they want as a lab session or whatever, they want to get some extra training in. You know, the guys that you trust, you know, the lock boxes there, where some of the guys have their own key. Yeah. They go in there and train. So, It's open 7 days if you want, but officially where there's, structured schedule, 6 days, Monday through Saturday.
And give me some tips. If somebody wants to run an academy, they're in wherever in this country, and they want to open any kind of academy, any martial art, what's the trick? How come you've been successful?
Diligent, building relationships. I've been fortunate enough that I still have, keeping that retention, people that have started with me from day one, and building the relationship, being diligent,
So how do you build a relationship with your client? Somebody who's your student, you teach them, then what?
You build a rapport with them, right? So every day that I walk in, is usually when the kids are on the mats and have my coach Renee or one of the assistant coaches are helping out. The first thing I do is I go up to every parent. I shake their hand. Hey, how are you? How you been? And I'll make sure that I see that they know that I see them, that I recognize them. That's important because what? They're spending money. They're paying for their kid to get instruction. And it's not only just about their kid, right? It's about them too. Hey, you're so-and-so, Johnny's doing really well. He's picking up, and that building that rapport with them is important. It makes them feel good, makes them feel important, and it's genuine. Yeah. I'm not just doing it just for the sake of, I'm being very genuine.
Yeah, you care.
And my office door is always open, so I have parents pop in, we talk, we shoot the shit, it's like, we get personal with them, and I think that's important. The people that are just there, just to collect money or, oh, you owe me money, like those, I can't tell you how many people I've gotten from those gyms saying, man, the vibe here is so different. The atmosphere, the family atmosphere, and that's what you got to do. I think the law of attraction. It's one of those things where if you're genuine, you attract genuine people, and people see that, and that's important.
You go to a big party with 200 people. By the end of the night, the negative Nellies will find each other. Yep. The nice people who treat each other well, right? The athletic people, everybody finds their group. Yeah. So if you keep being yourself and giving that off, you'll keep attracting.
Absolutely.
And maybe the ones that you don't blend as well with, they'll leave and they'll go to that other academy. Do you have in your area, are there a lot of jiu-jitsu academies?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's, I don't want to name them all, but there's about five or six in the area.
And Lake Worth is growing, isn't it?
Yeah, Lake Worth is growing. You have Boynton that's growing. Everything, all the surrounding cities, Green Acres, Locks, Westgate, all those places, they're growing. What I think separates me from everybody else is, one, the atmosphere. The vibe, the family vibe. The other thing too is, I've over the years I've developed quite an elite competition team with the kids. So I have.
So you see that at tournaments.
Yeah. So my kids are there. They're at tournaments. They perform well, and then all the other parents in the area, I'm like, oh, so and so's training there. So and so's training there.
Yeah.
And now they're starting to come over. I'm not poaching them.
No.
But I let what I do, what my coaches do, speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a formula that I've developed. I've been fortunate enough that I've been around a lot of championship coaches, a lot of championship teams, and I've learned. Right. Mm-hmm. If you're not learning and you're that arrogant and saying, no, I'm going to do it myself this way. No. You learn what works.
Yeah.
And we
got to assume we don't know everything.
Exactly.
So we'll stay hungry to learn what the next thing
and
is.
That's important.
Yeah. One of your fellow black belts who got it from Stan, who's been here with us, Raul.
Raul, awesome guy.
He owns a Taekwondo, Jiu-Jitsu. He does a little bit of different things, striking, all that. And he told me once when I first met him, we talked about business, and he said his secret that he has found out that works very well running an academy is when someone calls, you got to answer the phone. And if you can't get to it, it's okay, but you got about 15 minutes. Yeah. That's like his magic number. He says, if I can call them back in those 15 minutes, they're still doing their research. Right. Nobody's already hooked them, because if the third call gets answered, they'll set an appointment. That's what happened to me. I looked up Gracie, I looked up Jiu-Jitsu, and I saw Gracie. And I go, okay, that's attractive because Henzo, because of Hoist, that's all I knew. And I called, and Stan answered the phone, probably in the first ring. Yeah. And he said, yeah, can you come tomorrow? And when I got there, Adrian was there. He gave me this private talk and showed me all kinds of stuff. I was so interested. Yeah. And I realized that's what works. Is that one of the things that maybe other academies aren't doing?
I can't tell you how many times I've yeah, you're not going to be able to answer every call, right? I'm way up here. I'm lucky enough that I have a really good marketing guy that helps me out, and I get the leads through my text. So as I'm driving, I'm calling people. But yeah, I can't tell you how many times, oh, thank you for calling me back. Yeah. Yeah, it happened to me yesterday, and I wound up closing a family. It's $400 a month. It's like, hey, it's one of those things where,
like, what could you be doing that you don't want to get a family started in your business and make $4,800 a year, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What is there? When you go to gyms, I think the gym model of lifting weights at a gym is amazing because you get thousands of members in these big gyms, but not that many people are there.
Yeah.
Right. In jiu-jitsu, is it similar? Do some people pay and they don't show up that much?
It does. It's surprising. You have people that will pay, start, they're there for maybe the first couple weeks, and then, life happens.
Yeah.
That's why you have blue belts that, have been blue belts for 10 years, and it's one of those things where, so, I learned this from Stan, and it's one of those things where, hey, if you don't see this person, you can sit there and just collect the money month by month, and whatever, if so-and-so is not showing up, I'm still getting paid. But it speaks volumes when you call that person, hey, I haven't seen you for a couple of weeks, is everything okay? One, it says, hey, this guy's not the same as everybody else. He's actually calling to check up on me, and he's asking me how I am, and that's the other thing you do, right? That's how you develop the rapport.
Yeah.
Do
you ever, not that you're trying to shame them, but do you ever snap them back into coming to train?
Yeah. Say, hey,
you just needed that call.
And it depends on the relationship you have with that person, right? So, in jiu-jitsu, the one thing is, you build that brotherhood, that camaraderie, so you can bust somebody's chops, and they're like, that's how they know they're in the pack.
If you get made fun of,
say, yo, get your ass back in here, dude. Let's go. Get your ass. Let's go, and get back to training. And then okay, I'll be there.
They needed that little push.
Yeah,
isn't that funny how guys, there's some Instagram reels I've seen that are funny where a guy and his girl will walk up to another guy and girl, and they're all friends, and the two girls will tell each other how pretty they look and this, but when they walk away, they're like, I hate her, I can't stand her. But guys, what do? Dude, are you getting fatter? Yeah. You look so weak.
That's love.
Right? Yeah, you walk away, you go, that's the best guy, man. I love that guy.
That's love.
And in jiu-jitsu, it happens
all the time.
It's funny you said that Stan's Academy used to be a bar, because when Stan was here, he said that, and I didn't know that, he said that jiu-jitsu for him is like owning a bar. Like Cheers, where Norm would walk in and everybody, Norm. And it's like that, right? You see your friends, but you're doing something healthy.
Yeah.
You're not drinking, you're fighting and
you're
wrestling.
choking your friends.
Yeah.
And Stan's so good at this. And if I don't see you on a regular basis, and you leave, I might have a mental lapse and forget your name, right? Stan will remember your name 5 years later. And I'm like, how the fuck do you do that?
Yeah.
I'm like, so-and-so. I'm like, I remember the face, but I don't remember his name.
That's just a gift.
Yes.
Who else has it? Adrian Alsina. His classes, I've seen classes with 35 children. It's easier for me to remember an adult's name because I have a full conversation. Right. I know Santos Caban. I can remember details about it. But a bunch of little kids, you're not having deep conversations, and he remembers their full name and one after the other. Yeah, that's got to be a gift.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, how do you do that? He goes, oh, no, I just do it. I'm like,
dang.
And at the end of the day, it makes people feel good. It's like, damn, Stan, I haven't seen Stan in forever, and I haven't trained in forever, and he remembers my name.
Yeah.
And those are some of the things that you learn along the way, and things like that. So
I felt good last weekend in open mat on Sunday. A guy walked in. I don't think I've seen him in a year, but the moment I was rolling and I saw his face as he walked in, as we had already started, and it just popped in my head. I go, Jake. And he goes, yeah, man, you got a good memory. I don't know how that happened. Maybe Adrian's rubbing off on me, I hope. All right, so what's the churn in this? Because you're in a recurring revenue model. You got to keep hustling. You gain this family. You gain another guy, and later, like you add a couple this week, a couple contracts, a few. How many leave?
Well, summertime is a little different. Because a lot of travel.
They pause it?
Yeah, they pause it, right? So it's like, damn. So year after year, for the last 7 years, June sucks.
Yeah.
So you have to do a little bit of creative. So what I did this year, as opposed to other years, because I was doing summer camp,
It's a headache.
Summer camp's a pain in the ass.
It looks like it.
Because it's, the gym takes, the academy takes wear and tear, the kids, so it's one of those things where it's like, and, it's cool because you get to, the kids are fun, but they're there all day.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and then on top of that, you got to be there all day with the kids, and then you have to be ready to teach
in the
evening classes, right?
Yeah.
So it's a long day. So this year what I did was I opened up the marketing. So I'm advertising a little bit. I'm doing a few different promotions to bring them in, and it's so far it's working. But yeah, I mean, summertime's a little bit different. And during a normal month, if you gain 10 and if you lose more than 3, then you got to start like, okay, I got to start figuring stuff out, things like that. So I would probably say maybe if you lose more than 30%. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, you don't want, because you never stop.
Yeah.
You're on that hamster wheel. All right, so you've taught kids classes?
Yeah. I was teaching most of the kids classes in Weston for quite a while, and then stopped obviously when we opened up.
You went to go run your own program. So let's talk about kids, because you've got 4 kids. I'd love to hear challenges, victories in your journey as a father.
Challenges, just they're growing up. You have to give, I grew up in a time where, you got the back of the hand, you said something the wrong way. And I think as we grow as, individuals, and we want to do things our way, where, the basics are there, but you also let them work within a certain parameter. Once they get out of that parameter, then you got to reel them back in. It's obviously, the teenage years are always a pain in the ass. They're finding themselves, they're kind of figuring out who they are, things like that. So, you gotta have the patience for that, obviously, right? You've got yours, they've all gone through the different stages. But if you can keep them in line, grades, whatever, extracurriculars that they're doing, and just, because our job as parents is to make productive citizens, right? Somebody that, you don't have to go visit at the county jail on every Saturday and Sunday. It's like, shit, where did I go wrong? Yeah. Giving them that structure, I think for me is important. That's what we did. I was very fortunate enough that my wife gave them that structure where, right, homework, play, get ready for bedtime.
And she handled a lot of that while you were traveling and while you were working in the office.
I was back in the day, I was gone Sunday. I would leave Sunday night. I wasn't back home till Thursday.
Wow.
So I missed out a lot for the first 5 years. I missed out on a lot. I mean, I was there, don't get me wrong, but I missed out on a lot. Yeah. So when I was, when I started working remotely, my youngest, he stayed with me.
He got quite a bit of you.
He got all of me,
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And have you had to bring up your kids differently, each one? Or was there a similar style that worked?
Similar style, but everybody's an individual, right? So my daughter is me in a girl's body. So she's very headstrong. She's very stubborn. So
you guys clashed?
Very much so.
Still?
Not as much now. She's 23, so she understands, but yeah, during the high school and like her first couple years of college, she was always challenging, and that's the one that kind of figuring out as an individual, as an adult, and how a lot of colleges, I don't want to get political, but they swing a certain way.
Yeah.
And I was okay, because I know if I tell her this way, she's gonna fight me back.
Yeah.
So I go, Haley, do your research. Okay, I'm not going to tell you, I will never tell you how to vote. I will never tell you what to do when it comes to politics. Do your research.
Yeah, think for yourself.
Think as an individual. Think how you were raised. Yeah. Right? Look, open your eyes and see everything around you.
Yeah.
And then slowly but surely, she's like, Dad, you know what? This, Dad, you know that. I'm like, you see what I've been trying to tell you?
Yeah.
I go, I did my job.
Good.
The middle one, Skylar, is he's a little bit more laid back. So I didn't have to be on his ass as much. He's very, out of all of them, he's the most disciplined as far as, wrestling. Even now, I mean, he's got to train 5-6 days a week. If he doesn't, then he's like, he's a mess. But he's very disciplined. He's, the way he eats, how he trains, he's running every day. He's lifting every day. Wow. He's on the mat every day. So that, that's him, so I've never had to push him to do anything. Wow. That it's always, hey, I introduced it. He loves it.
He's running with it.
He ran with it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny because all of them have a certain component of mine, and the discipline part for Skylar, I never had to tell him to do anything when it comes to wrestling, and I was happy that he graduated this past weekend, and he's going, like, if you would ask me 4 years ago, is he, I knew he'd graduate, but then to get his master's, wow, I wouldn't have guessed it.
Good plan.
And the little one, the youngest, is always the biggest pain in the ass because and plus he's the youngest. He's 14. His brother's 22. His sister's going to be 24. So he was like, he sees, them. So he, he's been around adults, around older people his entire life. So he thinks he's that.
Yeah. He seems so quiet.
Yeah. He's quiet, but he's a troll, right? Where he knows, he knows when to chime in or things like that. Or like he knows how to get under his sibling's skin. Does
he get under your skin?
No, he doesn't bother me that much because, again, each one of them has a certain component of mine.
Yeah.
I'm kind of that guy who's always busting chops and talking shit to my friends.
Yeah.
So he does that at home a lot, and it drives my wife crazy. She's like, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, let me deal with it. I go, get over here, and then
he'll calm down for a little while.
For a little bit.
Sometimes maybe like once a year or whenever one of you guys posts this dinner that you guys, I've seen your picture in it. You guys have like a black belt dinner every once in a while?
Yeah, we do.
And that looks amazing. It's this big table full of some badasses in there. And they're all Henzo?
They're all Henzos, and they're all Stans.
Oh, man.
So that's the one thing where, you got one guy, and Stan and I, we text quite often, and, he'll call me and we'll BS a little bit because, he's out in Utah doing his thing. But, from one guy, he came down here as a brown belt, and started teaching and it kind of grew exponentially. And from that one guy, I mean, we had Weston, then Lake Worth, Fort Lauderdale, you have Boca, we have Raul's opening a place, Allen's opening a place.
That's right.
So yeah, from all those black belts came from one guy.
Yeah, it's like an Amway pyramid that is spread out. That's amazing. When I see those pictures every once in a while, I think, man, I wish somebody would mess with you guys. While you're all at dinner, because jiu-jitsu is not the type of thing where you look at some of these. You look at Larry,
little guy. Larry, yeah,
he's a little guy.
Yeah, it's happened. We were at Hard Rock. I think it was Hard Rock years and years back. We were celebrating. I think it might have been Stan's birthday, and we were there hanging out, and some guy starts talking shit with Stan.
Oh wow!
And Stan's kind of nothing ever escalated, but it's like, dude, like you have no idea what you just walked away from.
Well, from not just Stan, the rest of you.
Yeah, I know.
Wow, that takes some balls to start picking some fights.
Yeah.
That's something I've learned about jiu-jitsu is that you don't know who knows what. Yeah. I don't want to fight anybody on the street. First of all, they might have a weapon, and second of all, I don't know if that guy is an MMA fighter and a Muay Thai or. Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I teach I've created a curriculum that has been I've added on to the years, and actual street self-defense jiu-jitsu is one of the things that I stress. The sign on the door says self-defense. One thing, don't get me wrong, I like the competition aspect of jiu-jitsu, but that's kind of been the focus now. And, when you see the memes and the T-shirt, make jiu-jitsu violent again, that's what it is. It's one of those things where, hey, I need to be able to take care of myself out in the street. That's why these parents send their kids to learn, hey, I don't want my kid to get bullied. I don't want my son, my daughter I want them to be able to take care of themselves. Yeah. So one of those things is, hey, street jiu-jitsu is legit.
I said to Adrian once, I go, what would be kind of cool is if we ever did the class in the parking lot. Because that's a whole new ball game. Yeah. I'm not going to pull guard and lay on my back and get my head hit against the cement, which coincidentally today the lesson was, this morning in class, was someone's in your guard. No, someone's sitting on top of you, and they're hitting you. And, protect the back of your head so it doesn't hit the cement, and then, here, right? And then catch them when they're trying to throw a punch so you can work your way up. That's easy on the mat, but man, that would be scary to be on the ground when you got cement on your back of your head.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, hey, jiu-jitsu works great on the ground, okay? And I'm a big advocate of learning different disciplines, right? That's martial arts. That's what it's about, right? I learn how to box, learn how to, a little bit of Muay Thai, learn how to kick, learn how to defend. And if the fight goes to the ground, you're prepared, right? Because that's where we live, but movement, circles, right? Hey, might not be just 1-on-1. It might be 2-on-1, 3-on-1. I'm like, shit.
You don't want to go to the ground.
You don't want to go to the ground.
Yeah.
You're going to get stomped. And on top of that, even if it's 1-on-1, you don't know who's out, who's watching that's going to kick you in the head, or who's friends with the guy that you're fighting.
Yeah. I was at a restaurant with Adrian a few months ago, and it's just us. And I said, Adrian, right now, because I want to get into his head, like I want to get into your head. I go, if we're sitting here at this booth, and a bad guy comes in right now, what's your game plan? And he shared with me his game plan. It was kind of, if it's one guy, and it's clearly just one guy, he could do whatever. He could
exactly
double leg, blast double, he could, bring him down. He said, or he can strike. But he said, if it's two guys, I will not go to the ground. I'm going to keep my distance, strike and move and stay away from them. And I like asking guys these sort of things because then I can start, I don't know, pretend, I'm sitting in a restaurant with my wife and my kids. I want to know, what if a bad guy, I have to have a plan.
And it's one of those things where, I think most guys that train, they walk into a room and they're assessing everything. It's like, all right, so-and-so, oh, I see that guy over there. Or that, you look for context clues.
Yeah.
Who's got cauliflower ear. Yeah. Wrestler, boxer. All right, we'll see.
Who looks like a threat.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have a 31-day program for men, 31 days to become a better man. And I don't think it's a challenge that day, but I talk about when you go to a restaurant, when you go anywhere, sit looking at where danger could come from. Let your wife be there. She's not going to be as quick and as strong as you and your reaction times. So you watch the front door. Yeah. Have a game plan. My kids all know when we walk into a restaurant, they know I'm going to watch the door. But they know that there's an exit in the back of every restaurant. Mm-hmm. And I say, if any danger, any yelling, screaming, you see me get up, fly out the back. Yeah. Get out of here. And it shocks me how many times I go to restaurants and I see a guy with his back to the front door, and he's got his kid or his wife. Is that who he expects to defend him?
Yeah, it's old school, and I learned that from my father and my uncles, where hey, you never sit with your back to the door, because that's just old school stuff. I don't know, you watch it in the mafia movies and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah,
it's like I'll always make sure that or if we're the tables are parallel to the door, so where I can get out and I can still look.
Yeah.
But I'm always looking at
the
door.
like what you just said, if the table's parallel, for a guy who carries a firearm, he wants to have if he's right-handed, he wants to target that way so he can react. I mean, there's all these little things. I first realized, I never thought about it, but I always sat that way. And we were newly married, and my wife and I went to an Italian restaurant in Miami Beach. And it was like a legit Italian where they all had Italian accents. And the guy was kind of like guiding for my wife to sit there. And she said, no, my husband's going to want to sit there. And the guy goes, mafioso complex.
Yeah.
I go, oh, yeah, mafioso.
Survival. It's one of those things, survival complex. I'm one of those guys that if there's anything that really happens, zombie apocalypse or, national, millions of people are going to die just from stupidity.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like, okay, I'm not going to be the first. I'm not going to be part of the first million that dies from stupidity.
Last a little longer, and that's probably because society has weakened us.
Yes.
In several ways. One, we're all guilty of. I use a map to get here. I know how to get here, but it's convenient because if there is a traffic jam, there's an accident, it'll guide me the other way. That's probably made us lose the ability to, north, south, east.
Our own GPS.
Yeah, our own, which is gone. I think it's so dumbed down. But beyond that, we have welfare. And we have different things that make people who wouldn't procreate now be eligible. So the gene pool is probably getting lower.
It's watered down.
Yeah, because you could probably hunt and kill. I've hunted a little bit, and I can probably survive a little bit. But now the dumb guy or lazy guy survives just as well as we do, so he procreates.
Right.
That's never happened, I don't think. 100 years ago, nowhere in the world was anybody just being maintained.
Yeah.
So it's going to be scary what happens over the next 200 years.
I was having this conversation with my family a while ago, and if anything ever happens to where hey, technology, we don't have technology, we have to go back 50 years, just to survive, the way people survived 50 years ago. A lot of people die. Right. I'm happy in the fact that I've taught my sons how to fish. They can hunt, they can shoot. I've taught my daughter how to shoot. Just hey. We can protect ourselves. We can hunt. We can do things.
Yeah. You know, it's so, you could talk about that and it's, oh yeah, anybody can do it. Yeah, right. Go do these things. Next month, I'm going with my men's group to Idaho. We're going to be in the mountains for 3 days, but it's a survival course. Mm-hmm. So we're going to learn. And one of the things we're going to do, myself included, is, all right, it's your turn. Tonight, you're on your own. You're not in the tent. And, oh, give me your firearm. So none of us will have a firearm, and we're going to spend the whole night out by ourselves, knowing there's wolves, there's coyotes, there's bears, mountain lions. It could be anything out there. Just to feel what that is like for one night.
It's scary. We watch Naked and Afraid on the History Channel a lot. You know, it's like, damn, you know, that's no joke, because you're dealing with environment, you're dealing with nature, you're dealing with just natural things.
Hunger
that we're not used to. I mean, sometimes these people don't eat for 2 weeks, you know, and they're hunting, they're actively hunting, they're actively looking for food.
It's hard.
And they don't eat for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's amazing. Let me ask you this, because I've interviewed several jiu-jitsu guys, and I've never asked this. I lift weights probably 3-4 times a week at home. I go to jiu-jitsu. When I'm going good, it's like 5 to 7 days a week. And when I'm training for, like, I went to a mountain recently, so I had to ruck every day. So I couldn't train much. I was doing like 1 a week. But when I'm going good, you know, 5 days a week, let's call it, and I'm lifting weights 4 days a week and maybe jogging once a week, I'd like to really button it down. I don't know what a good routine is. Jiu-jitsu, I'm going to do. That's my number one exercise. But what if I want to compete later this year? I want to compete. What's a good routine I should be in for a few months getting ready for it? What kind of exercises? What kind of weights?
Definitely core exercises, lower back, shoulders. You know, bench press, you're not going to bench press anybody. Legs, definitely. So anything from core down, lower back down, and you got to take care of your shoulders. You know, because that's, to me, that's like the number one injury that happens. You know, wow, my shoulder, this and that. You know, and if you can't turn, you can't move. You know, your shoulders. You know, jiu-jitsu is very, you know, you have to move, find angles, and create. So anything core, lower body, definitely keep working on that. You should be training on the mat, you know, 6 hours, 7 hours a week. You know, we're older, so we're gonna break a lot easier, and we have to take care of ourselves, right? And plus, on top of that, this isn't our full-time job, right? Jiu-jitsu is my full-time job to teach, but not to train, right? So if I can get 7-8 hours of good mat time with people that I trust, and get some good cardio, and get that muscle memory down, and get the lactic acid working, and, you know, developing, absolutely.
How about jogging?
I'm not a bit... Dude,
that'll take a lot of toll on the knees.
There's not a lot of flight in my body, so I either elliptical or cycling.
Yeah,
you know, so
it's
not
better
the
on banging
knees.
on the knees.
Yeah, I've had 2 mastectomies, just wear and tear over the years. So yeah, I'm not running a whole lot, but when I am training, getting ready for something, elliptical and cycling at a you know, rapid pace, getting that heart rate up. And plus, it for some reason, cycling for me helps me strengthen my legs. You know, and then, you know, outside of that, that's pretty much it. I mean, running helps, but I mean, if you've never been a natural runner, I wouldn't.
And weights, are you doing
at least 3-4 days a week?
Okay, and are you doing heavy to build strength?
No, my ego's not that big anymore. You know, I tore my pec and my labrum. I had 520 on the bench.
Dang.
You know,
520.
I got it past a sticking point, and I had somebody spotting me, and, you know, they weren't really doing a great job spotting me, and all of a sudden I just, you know, all of this was just black. So yeah, I don't do heavy anymore. I do functional, you know, where your muscles are still going to be strong, you're still going to be able to perform, but, you know, I'm 51 years old now. I mean, there's no reason for me to be benching anything more than 225 if I can. Okay. Squats, not really, just because of the wear and tear on the knees. But leg extensions, hamstrings, and stuff like that, keeping those muscle groups strong, definitely.
Good advice. I gotta do more of that. What else? Where could people go visit you? Your academy? Where is it in?
We're right off of Lantana and Jog in Lake Worth. It's kind of obscure because there's a plaza, like a strip mall in front of us, and it's kind of funny because there's another MMA place in front of us.
So people call you from there. I don't see you.
I've had quite a few guys come from there over. But yeah, so that's okay. So we're in the Cube Smart facility. So it's a big building. We're right next to a gymnastics place that we share. the building is just divided into two, and it's the gymnastics place is huge. I think they have something crazy like 10,000 square feet. Wow. My spot is 5,000 or a little less than that, and my mat space is close to 3,000 square feet.
And is there a website or social media where they find you?
www.renzogracieLakeworth.com.
Renzo Gracie.
Yeah. Renzo.
Renzo. There's an R, but in Portuguese it's
yeah.
What's the on social media also?
Yeah,
Renzo
we're on
Gracie
Instagram.
Lakeworth?
We're on Facebook. So yeah, Renzo Gracie Lakeworth. You'll find us, and you see. I try to keep the content fresh and updated. I post 2-3 times a week, just because I don't want to overkill. But yeah, you'll see our kids program, our adults program. We do have a striking program on the weekends. One of my guys, Jonathan, does a really good job with that, and is growing. So yeah. And
the good thing is, owning a jiu-jitsu academy, there's always content.
Yeah.
You could do this and record, and everybody wants to see that. What are they doing? That's pretty cool. Put the hours, whatever. Yeah. Anything's content. It seems like.
Yeah, I do a lot. I have a women's, even though I'm a big proponent of the women training with men, and I'm not one of those guys that women can train. No, I'm not old school like that. Like, look, if you ever do get into an altercation out in the street,
it's going to be with a man.
Exactly. Yeah. So you need to know how to take care of yourself with a man. So against a man. So I do that. But we also have women specific classes. One of my students, Laura, she does a really good job. She just took over the women's program, and she's growing it. So she's doing a really good job with that. She's older, and she started with me, I think, when she was in her early 50s. And Laura, if you listen to this, sorry. But yeah, now she's like, I think 57, 58, and when she first started, she goes, I want to do jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, okay. And I'll tell you what, man, this lady, she surprises me every day, just because, she's gotten so technical over the years. She's a purple belt now. She's gotten so technical over the years. Her confidence has gotten good, to where now she's coaching class.
That's a big jump.
So for me, that's one of those things where, like, that's what this is all about.
Yeah. And then she was able to start beyond 50.
Yeah.
I always...
Most men don't even, most men won't even last, a year when they're that old, And I'm not calling you old, Laura, but, at the end of the day, it's true. I mean...
The years add up.
Yeah.
That's mental toughness. You're right about coaching. That's another level, because I'm absorbing information that's being taught in the academy, and I'm doing it. I'm doing the best I can. But if you asked me to teach someone this stuff, I'd mess it up. When I hear you guys teaching, and you've coached me from the sideline at the academy during a Thursday open match where you bring Hunter, I don't know how you guys know all this stuff. And it just comes natural. You've been doing it for so long, I guess, right?
Yeah. And people don't really realize you learn more when you start teaching, because it's one of those things where, like, all right, you're going through the process in your brain, and all of a sudden, sometimes you'll say something and it's like, oh shit.
There's a solution.
And so, when you make that transition, I didn't, I've been coaching wrestling since, I got out of college, even when I was in college. But, you start developing, and you start seeing things, and you start seeing, it's like, I equate it to human chess. You start seeing pieces on the board, you start seeing things, and, you start anticipating, and then it's like, okay, cool. So, for a while there, when I came from wrestling and doing jiu-jitsu, now, and then to go back to wrestling, I see jiu-jitsu.
But you can't Kimura the guy. That's frowned upon.
So I take that with me. I'm in tournaments every weekend, whether it's with wrestling or jiu-jitsu.
Yes,
so I mean, my weekends, are they're packed.
Absorbed with that.
Yeah.
What happens in wrestling if you get someone in a Kimura? What if you kind of accidentally, you can't, you got to let it go?
Anything that you go past, that natural, natural plane, you take it past the 45-degree plane.
So you can't armbar either, because that goes that plane?
No.
Okay, what about a arm triangle?
You can.
In wrestling?
Yeah, you can.
So you can submit them?
Yeah. Well, if you're smart, you will, like, but it's so tight, and if they do that, then the referee will call it, whatever.
And that's fair in a tournament.
That's fair. Arm triangles, katakatamis, and stuff like that. Yes, because you have the arm in, right? Yeah. If it's just the head, no, it's potentially dangerous. They'll stop it, and you guys got to start over. And if you keep doing it again, then you start getting hit for points.
Yeah. You know what's, and we'll wrap it up here, something about drilling and about practicing. And I think this goes for everything. Business, get in the reps. Being a dad, get in the reps. Everything you do. there was an, I'll say his name here just because my buddy Dave Burke, he only goes to Sundays open mats. And so I rarely have ever seen him other than that. And I was a white belt, and I got him in a triangle, and it was the first time I tapped him, and he's a higher belt than me. And he told me, oh, man, you just set all that up because you did this, this, and this. And I go, Dave, I don't even know how I got that. It was just that I saw for a second your arm go down, and my leg went over. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even me thinking. It just happened. Yeah. And that's probably, right, by putting in the repetitions.
Muscle memory.
The drilling. I know with Stan, we used to do a lot of drills where it was like, lock up the triangle, let go, lock it up, let go. And just that. Or the guy's in your guard, and he puts his hand on the ground, and you would have to go over and get him in a Kimura. But just doing that so many times.
We used to do situations. So armbar, right? So you get in armbar position, traditional armbar where you're just sitting on side, both legs over. All right, you've got your armbar locked in. You got to defend. I got to finish.
I like those.
So like, oh shit, he's actually trying to hit an arm bar. So how do I defend? So you got to go quick.
Yeah, and that's a good drill.
Yeah,
and then go to the other side and then switch.
Yeah, and a lot of it, I do a lot of situational, situational drilling. Hey, get into this position. You got to finish. Yeah, same thing. You got to finish.
So you're both working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that where you both have some.
And it creates mental toughness. It creates that muscle memory. Even to this day, as many stand-ups, as we did, my wife or somebody would come up behind me, try to, my hands go right here, right away, instinct. Yeah. Right, close my windows, and I'm here. Yeah. So that muscle memory just stays with you.
Yeah, and that applies to life.
Yeah.
Right, do the drills, get up, don't hit the snooze button.
Yeah.
Right, now you're getting good at it. Now the alarm sounds, you just naturally pop up.
Now you just wake up. Yeah, I set my alarm always, but I always wake up before?
Yeah,
always. Yeah. My wife's like, why'd you wake up so early? It's just when my eyes open, and then I'm like, okay, there's only so much you can lay in bed. So I was like, all right, let's get the day started.
Yeah, get after it. Go do stuff. All right, Santos, great to have you here. It was great to learn more about you and your journey. Let me ask one more question. How long are you going to do this?
Till the wheels fall off.
Really?
Yeah. This is something that I love, and at this stage of the game, it's not about me. Right, I've I tell my students, told my son this all throughout his, high school and college career. Don't do this for me. Mm-hmm. I've had my day in the sun. Mm-hmm. Do this because this is what you want to do. If this is what you want to do, I will support you. I will coach you. I will lift you up. I'll do whatever I need to do to get you to where you want to be. But, outside of that, I'm just here to help coach. So me seeing the development of my students is what fulfills me now.
Oh yeah.
And if I want to get, I'll train on the mat or whatever. I'm actually thinking about, training in the World Masters in August. Wow. I just got over a shoulder injury, so I got to catch up. But yeah, outside of that, it's all about my students and, just developing them at this point in my life.
That's the stage that you're in, and you'll continue that for a long time, hopefully. Well, good. Keep it up. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.